Alright guys, today we're going to be teaching you in 5-minute front end, which never goes 5 minutes, how to create a toast. And we're also going to show you how to trigger it when it comes online or it goes offline, and how you might do that in some basic HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. I want to thank our long-term sponsor, Dev Mountain Coding Bootcamp. There hasn't been an organization that has quite sponsored and supported the channel quite like Dev Mountain. And I've had the pleasure of not only partaking in their quality assurance coding bootcamp, which was quite easy to furlough after 2 weeks in, but also viewing some of their campuses in the Provo, Utah, and talking with several of their students. I couldn't recommend their platform and their bootcamp more. Check them out at devmountain.com. Alright, so let's get started. The only thing we have in this HTML file is a little bit of margin equal to 0 to take off the body, which is just makes our styling a little bit easier. So what we're going to start by doing is creating a container in our HTML. Right? This is going to be our notification container. Its whole purpose here is to have an outer one that's going to absolutely position a fixed element at the bottom of the page. So like in our toast, we're going to position it at the bottom of the page, but you could do whatever you want. We're just going to go ahead and call it notification-container, right? And then within that, we're going to have a notification, which will be we'll just make that another ID. And then we'll have, if you notice, we had an icon. It's going to be different for if it's online or offline. And we're going to give this a div. Go ahead and give it an ID of icon. And we'll put the online values in there, but it doesn't really matter. So this is like the HTML markup for a check. Not the HTML, it's the, might be ASCII. I always forget what you call value, but that's essentially the way that we can use some little built-in sort of ASCII art is what we'll call it, but that's not the right name. And so we have our status, and then here we'll have online, right? Right now it doesn't really look like much, it's not stacked properly or anything, but this is all of our HTML. Now we're going to be modifying it, and we're going to be positioning it and all that sort of stuff, and we'll do that right now. So in our container, let's go ahead and just get this positioned to the bottom of the page first. Now we're going to be using CSS Grid for part of this for the items in the container, but for the container itself, the notification container, all we need to do is we want the position to be fixed, okay, and then we just have to go ahead and put bottom 0. We want to position it to the bottom of the page. Now right now it's all the way to the bottom and we haven't really done too much, but we also want to go ahead and have the container take up the full width. The reason for it, the reason for it is we're gonna, and you can see that that's exactly what it's doing here. You'll see the container itself is taking up the full width that it's in. It's just gonna make it a little bit easier down the road. We might actually be able to eliminate that now that I think about it. But display grid, and we'll come back to that. I might actually come back and eliminate that as some cleanup. So we're gonna have a grid using CSS Grid in our notification container. You can see it's all set up there. It's all working. Great. We haven't really done anything with the grid items quite yet. Now, from here, we want to just set up our base level setup of the grid. That's going to be the easiest thing. So just get our CSS going, and then we can worry about the functionality. The functionality is going to be a little bit, you know, you could do it in either order. I typically like to do the do it in sort of HTML and markup and jump in between. But in this case, we're gonna go pretty heavy into the CSS grid. So what I'm going to do is, in the actual notification, I want the icon and status to be in line. I want to give them a little bit of spacing. And there's a couple different ways we can do about this. The way that I'm going to do it is I'm just going to use CSS grid. And so we're going to make the notification itself a grid, and we're going to give a grid gap of 10 pixels. We're then going to align the grid items, which in this case are the block level elements, icon, and status. And then we're going to set some columns, because grid by default has a one column sort of setup. And we're going to go ahead and set those columns to be auto, which means it's going to take up the minimum, sort of the automatic amount it needs, and fraction, which means it's going to be one fraction. So if we had two fractions, it'd be 50%, but in this case, it's going to take up the rest of the room. We're then going to want to justify self to center. And we want this width to be something manageable, like 250 pixels is just sort of something I chose. And then we're going to give some padding to our toast. We want it to, we don't want it to be too close, so we'll give it 15 pixels top and 25 pixels wide. Most of this stuff I just, we'll come back to color. So we'll give it a color of white. Most of this stuff is just, I just sort of played around with it, except one aspect of it. So before we get to there, let's go ahead and put a border radius on here of 3 pixels top left corner, 3 pixels top right corner, and then nothing on the rest of it. All right, so far all we really are going to see is that it's centered. And you can see our grid, it's got a little bit of padding, and we're going to do some other CSS to it in a second. Now, what we're going to do next is we're going to go and define a offline and online class. Actually, let's jump into the script tag. So an easy way, if you guys don't know, of how to find out if you're online or offline, what you can do is add an event listener that listens for those events. So we have online, and then we're going to have offline. It's going to do essentially the same thing. And in our event listener is how we're going to trigger the toast. We'll do offline first. Now, because our logic is going to be very similar, what I did was I wrote a function called call notification. And what this function takes in is a type that's going to specify if it's online or offline. It also then takes in a status text, because our text that is in our component here, this online, that needs to swap dynamically. And it also takes in an icon text, which is more so HTML, really, at the end of the day. Icon HTML, so let's rename that. And this is going to be injected as HTML. This is going to be injected as text. And then we're going to add a class that's going to change the way that this looks and add an animation. First thing we're going to do is we're just going to get the notification element. This is going to be using just some basic HTML to get an element by ID. And so let's go ahead and zoom out a little bit. And this is going to get the notification. We don't care about the container. The container is just there to position it. What we care about is the actual content within the container. We're going to say const status, and we're also going to get that status because, and there's other ways that you could do this. We can actually access status and icon without having to go and get element by ID. And in all honesty, that might be one way of going about it. In reality, you're not going to be doing probably too much vanilla HTML, but it is important to dive into it. But I think getting element by ID is very clean and sort of straightforward. And in this case, we know what it is that we're targeting. So that's what we're going to be doing. But you would have access to sort of the child div, right? So we'd get notification, and then we get the first div, which we knew would be icon, and then we get the second div, which we knew would be status, and that would be referenced in here already. So we could do that, but that's not what I did. First thing we want to do is we want to go ahead and set status, which is our status element, just status.innerText equal to the status text, right? We want to update that text. So inner text is going to change the text that's in there. And then we're going to take icon dot inner HTML. Now the reason that this is going to be inner HTML is because the when I applied inner text doing this, it actually didn't convert this, and it just outputted it as text. And we want it to render as HTML, right? We want it as the checkbox or the warning icon. Now, after this point, what we want to do is we're going to take our notification and we're going to take the class list, and we actually want to remove two classes we haven't defined yet. And what those classes are is offline and online. This is how we're going to trigger our notification. We want to make sure those don't exist. And then we're going to leave a line break here, and there's one more piece of code after adding a class name that we'll come back to. So we're going to take notification.className, and we're just going to set it equal to the type, right? We're going to pass the class type into here. Cool. Now let's go ahead and define our online and offline so we can get this looking a little bit more, nice, I guess. A little bit more nice. So we have an online class, and all this is going to do is have a background dash color, and this is going to be sort of a material green, right? This isn't really CAF50. Cool. And then we're going to have a offline, and this is going to have a material. I think I got these colors from, I'm not very good at designing, so I come, like when you see these colors and stuff, these aren't my colors. These are things that I took off of, I want to say this was Beautify. And I think at this point, let's go, typo there. So at this point, we should be able to trigger at least the background color. So when we go offline, so what our type is, it's offline, which is also going to be our class. It is the status text, which in our case here we want to pass in offline. And then it's the icon HTML, which we're going to pass in as a string, but we're going to inject as HTML. And let me get that little HTML snippet. Where is it? And this little bit here will go ahead and allow us to inject that little triangle warning. Now, if I set this all up properly, which is a big if, because these things never work as you're doing them live, we should get a little bit of an offline. So we get this nice little red, which that doesn't look as nice as it did before. Is that the right red? FF. Hashtag FF5252. I guess so. Maybe my vision's going. I'm getting old. All right, cool. So last thing we don't want to put. I put that in the wrong spot. So let's go ahead and put this back there, and we can see. We're going to trigger that. Oops. Save this. Trigger it one more time. There we go. So we have this little nice warning here. It's offline, it's on with the icon, right? And we can go ahead and copy this, throw it into online, and instead of offline, we want it to be online, and for the class. And then instead of that HTML, we want it to be this. Now, semantically speaking, now that we have something in here, we can go ahead and get rid of it, right? And let's go and save this, refresh, and we'll get offline, we'll get online, offline, online, offline, online. Cool. So that's pretty cool. We have it there, but we also want it to trigger dynamically. We want it to trigger an animation, and that's pretty easy to do. Let's jump back to our notification class, and we're going to make one small change here. We're going to go ahead and set the color to white, make it look a little nicer, and because I'm doing online, offline, this is going to keep on doing that. But cool, we have white text, a little bit nicer. Now, one thing I completely ripped off of the Angular material, I want to say it was Beautify, was this box shadow. I could not get the box shadow to look quite as nice on my own. So you'll see we have this box shadow here, and it looks nice, right? But now it's showing on the page. We're going to fix that. And how we're going to fix it is we're going to add a transform of 200 of translating it y, which transform essentially lets me take my element and then transform it on the page. And translate y here lets me move it 200 pixels down. Now you'll see that we don't have it on the page anymore, and we're actually going to need that for when we do our animation. So cool. It's not there. Very nice. So our notification container is gone, but now we can't see our container. Well, what we need to do is define a animation. And our animation is going to slide it up, then slide it down after a set amount of time. Now, we'll go ahead and define this. So to define an animation, you need keyframes, followed by the animation name. In this case, it's slide up. So how I did my animation was it has 4 states. It has the initial, like, hey, we want to move you down, which is at 0%. We want to transform where you're at by 200 pixels south. Then what I did was I gave it at 20%, meaning that I wanted it to go from 200 pixels down to back to 0 pixels transform. We're going to take transform here, and we're going to translate it back to y. So it should be in that initial state where it's now on the page. And we can test this very easily by when we go in our online-offline state. This is where we're going to define the animation. And because the animation, we want it to be similar for both, we can go ahead and use one selector, right? We just want the styling to be different, but we want the amount of time and how the animation works to be the same. And to do that, we're just going to take the animation property. We're going to call slide up. I put it up for 7 seconds, the entire animation. We're not done with it yet. And I also made it linear because I want it to, this is going to give it a timing. And we'll leave this off for a second so that you can completely see the difference it's going to make. And then at 80%, I still want it to be transformed at translate y. You might be saying, well, what is this doing? Well, what it's actually doing is causing a pause. It's causing it not to for about 5 seconds, because it's 7 seconds. So we got 1 second here. It goes from off the page to the page. And then from about here, we have about 4 seconds here where it goes from standing still to still standing still, which is important. If someone knows a better way of doing it, let me know, because I didn't really find one. And then we are going to translate it down south again by 200 pixels. It goes up, it pauses, lets the user read the message, and then goes down. So now, if I did this right, you should see that it goes up, it's going to pause, and then it's going to go down. And you see that. So what I did was I just threw linear on here because I want it to be exactly like that. Although at 7 seconds, that looks like it might have been a good amount of time. We might want to take linear off. So you see it goes up, pauses, then it goes down. About the same. It looks very similar. But that is our animation. Now, the issue we're going to have, which took the most amount of time, was that, believe it or not, that animation can only be triggered once. Even though we're adding and removing the class dynamically, and if we select the element, you'll see that it's online, and then we can go over here and we can select it offline. And you'll see the classes are changing and the content's changing. So what's happening? Why is this an issue? Well, after some investigation, about 40 minutes, I figured out from a wonderful blog post on CSS Tricks that one way to avoid this is that the offset width. So the notification, when it's being removed and it's being added, is keeping some of the position elements. And what we need to do here is just after we remove the class, we need to void the offset width, and that should do it. And that will allow us to continually run that animation. Because although we're not removing the elements from the DOM, we're just removing the class, it has a little bit of an impact on it. And so it causes some issues, which was really frustrating. But now we have a toast element at the bottom of the page that can get called online and offline. And you're saying, Dylan, why might you do this? Well, Nowadays, in the front end, you might be doing client-side caching with web workers. It doesn't matter. This is just a simple use case of how you might use a toast. You can use this same logic for any sort of error on your application or program or anything like that. But here's your own custom toast to be used as needed. As always, guys, thank you so much for watching the video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any sort of quick components that you want me to build like this, let me know in the details below. Check out my courses, all that good stuff. I'll see you guys next video. Like, subscribe, share, notification bell, all that good stuff. Bye, guys. Hey guys, thanks for watching the video. Don't forget to check out my 100 Algorithm Challenge course. Get you prepped for those technical interviews to make sure you get nice offers. I actually just added some new content to it so you can get prepared for those technical phone screens as well. There's a link in the description to get it for just $9.99.